In this tutorial, we're going to learn about collision events. For a collision event to be triggered, we have to have two things with colliders on them bump into one another. So what I'm going to do right now is create a simple 3D cube. I'm going to pull this up and have it above the ground, maybe pull it a little bit closer. And what I'm going to do with this is stretch it out sideways so that it's a nice kind of barrier. Maybe I'll pull this back a little bit more with a little bit of a path to go past so that it's a bit of an obstacle, but there's a way for the ball to go to give a little bit of a skill kind of component to my game here. Why don't we quickly create a bit of a material just so that we have something of a way that this looks a bit different and stands out as something dangerous, and kind of have it at the right level here. And now I have a physics object with a box collider. Let's see what happens if I just run this game in the first place. I go up to it and I bump into it and it just kind of stays put because it's not actually a physics object. It just exists in the world and I can collide with it, but it doesn't know what to do when I collide with it. So I could actually add a rigid body to it to add some physics. And what would the result be if I did so? Well, let's add a rigid body just to experiment. I'm not going to worry about any of the settings right now. We're just experimenting to see what happens. And here I can kind of push it around and push it off. Oops, drive a little bit too fast there. Maybe I'll turn my speed down a little bit. Let's give it just a 3. So maybe I actually don't want there to be a rigid body right now. I want this just to destroy my player if I run into it. However, how do I actually have my player be able to know that I've collided with this box? Well, let's head into our code for our player and try some things out. We're going to jump down to the bottom of our code here, and I'm going to introduce you to a very important set of methods. Well, just one for now, but it's the first one of many in a series of collision methods. And I'm going to type in on collision enter, and notice how it autocompletes really nicely. On collision enter is a method built into Unity that gets triggered when this object's collider interacts with some other collider. This is a reference to the other object's collider. So, triggered when I bump into something and then I actually access the thing I bump into. So what can I do in here? Well, collision. Let's take a quick look at what's stored under collision here. There is some information under collision, contacts and collider and impulse and relative velocity. I can get some information about the movement. I can get the actual rigid body of that other component. I can get the transform information, the position of it. The one that we're interested in right now is the collider itself, the collider that's attached to it. So the collision is the object and the collider is attached to it. So if this player ran into this cube, this box collider is the thing that I'll be accessing here. And so inside of it, what is it that I can actually get information about? Well, there's a bunch of things, and the one that we are going to be working with is a new idea called a tag. I'm just going to leave this in an error state right now. What is a tag? Well, let's take a look at let's click on our box, our cube. And maybe this is a good time to rename this to something like obstacle. In fact, I should probably make a prefab of this. Let's just do that before we forget. And under this obstacle, I have in my inspector this little drop-down menu of tag. And it comes along with a whole bunch of options: respawn, finish, editor only, main camera, player, game controller, obstacle, bullet. Yours might have a shorter list because I've added things to other projects that might be showing up here. If you don't see the tag you want, you can just add it. So what if, let's see, I already have one called obstacle, but what if we just call this for now wall? So what I'm going to do is click tag, add tag, and then I can actually add this drop-down menu, a new tag. I'm going to call this wall. Hit enter. Now I have a new tag. And if I click back on this from the drop-down menu, I have wall. What I've done now is given this object a unique property under the tag category that nothing else in the world has. There's a reason why we want to specify things that have certain tags. By the end of this tutorial series, we might talk about detecting ground state. I might have a different tag for the ground than I do for the wall because I want to check collisions with both things, but I want an easy way to tell the difference between what type of thing I'm colliding with, because it's not easy to tell just out of the box. Remember, our computers are kind of dumb. So I now have a tag for this wall. What I can do now is check if this tag on the thing I collided with is wall. I'm going to start off with an if statement. If the thing I collided with has a tag of wall, that tells me that I have collided with this particular thing. Or now that I made a prefab, I can actually just attach this tag of wall to the prefab itself. And now any obstacle I drag in, let's pull this up here, will have the tag wall automatically applied to it. I'll delete that for now. So in my code, if I've run into this wall, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to maybe reload my level for now, because I've hit an obstacle and that means I've died. So let's just borrow that code for quick testing and see how this works. I touch the wall, bink, back to the start. Awesome, I now have that collision event triggered. You could, if you wanted to, do something a little bit more interesting with this. For example, let me show you something that I've done for testing that I thought was kind of fun and a little bit different. I don't want my player to lose right off the bat. So I'm going to do something a little bit more complex. Let me talk you through this here, and you can pause the video and try this out if you'd like. I think I need to add a couple of variables in here. I need to add a public float collision force, so that's a little bit more customizable. I think that might be all it is right now. So what I've done is when I touch a wall, I'm going to actually add a force to my rigid body that I've been affecting in other ways. A new vector 3 that's going to be pointing in a random direction in a 100-degree spread. So I'm going to kind of have a randomized bounce direction. And, oh, sorry, this is the actually the, I think it's the force amount. In fact, so this is between 0 and 100, or negative 100 force. So I'm kind of bouncing it backwards at the rate of the force. And I am going to determine the direction of this force a bit randomly. Basically, I'm just causing a random bounce off so that I hit the wall and I get kind of tossed around. And if I get lucky, I'll land back on the platform. If I get unlucky, I might get sprung off to on the side of the map. So let's see here. Oh, I see what's wrong here. Go back to my player. I actually have no collision force set here. Let's make it 50 and just see what that does. And I'll show you a little bit of play testing tweaking here. Let's have my player selected. And there's a little tiny bump force. You see it just bumps a little bit. That's obviously way too small. So let's change it temporarily to 500. There we go. I get bumped into the air when I touch it and thrown off in kind of a bit of a random direction. And nice. That's kind of maybe not too punishing. Oh, I just got launched off there. But it's a bit of a different way for this interaction to happen. For now, I think it feels better and more difficult if I just use my new scene functionality. And you can play around with your own particular responsiveness for how you want your game to work as you develop your own things. In the next tutorial, we are going to add a little bit more complexity to the scene and maybe even add in some spawners. See you then.